Good evening, everybody. This is Juli Pitra, and we are here to do our Thursday talk about Pitranomics, the 10-part strategy to grow, protect, and transfer wealth. And this is the week following a really great session we had last week that talked about asset protection, tax mediation using entities like trusts. And we had Cedric Brown of Trust Up Community. He dropped some serious knowledge. We didn't have a chance really to discuss it, so this is going to be a more interactive meeting. If you had questions from last week, let's discuss them. Let's make a concerted effort to find out more about these types of entities. If you're a business person, it is absolutely crucial you have all of the information you can at your fingertips. So the first thing I'm gonna do, this is the part I always mess up, guys. So let's get this presentation going. Where is it? One day I'll get this down. Okay, basic desktop. Here we go. Is that showing us presenting or not? I can't even tell. Can somebody tell me, because I can't even tell if it's showing us presenting or not.
I don't think it is. I think it's just showing one page.
That again. Let's do this. Always have fun with, there we go. So last week we talked about how to protect what you've built, build your fortress. And now we're going to talk about building the foundation to building your fortress. So there's a lot to know. However, like I said, this is really interactive. So if you have questions, please raise your hand, put them in the chat. By the way, I found a new toy with Zoom. So let's see if it's working this time. Yes, we can do hearts. And apparently you can do a thumbs up. Am I seeing it? Not seeing it yet. And you're also supposed to be able to raise your hand. But use your chat, ask questions. Let's make sure did yours come up? I don't see it yet. It was just so much fun to do that. Anyway. Quick overview of the 10 strategies. It's cyclical. You can do it over and over. You can do several in a row. It's yours to do with as you will. But you're going to start with an assessment. That's like, where am I? What are my goals? And what resources do I have to accomplish my goals? And the next part is how to eat an elephant. It's one bite at a time. What's my roadmap? What's my plan to get the goals done using my resources? Who is in my lifeboat? Who is around you? Who is helping you? Who is supporting you? Who's cheering you on? Are these people in your lifeboat helping you to paddle, helping you towards success? Or are they causing you to sink and just really dampening your ability to progress? The next strategy, the Joneses don't have Jack. There's an expression called keeping up with the Joneses. And we're not going to do that. We're not going to worry about the Joneses. We don't care what the Joneses do. We're going to stick to our plan and our goals. Snack now, feast later is all about not squandering your resources, living beneath your means, being mindful of the expenditure of your resources so they can build something for you later on. Get professional help. One thing about this strategy, it impacts every other strategy. Not every bit of information, not every bit of wisdom is going to be in one person. Leverage the people who specialize and help them get you on your way. The next one, send your dollars out into the world and you want them to come back with friends. You don't want them to leave and never come back. Learn to accumulate so you can put that money to work. Build your fortress. That's what we're talking about today. What you're building, you want to protect it. There are many assailants to what you build. Learn to identify them, learn to take measures. Pay Uncle Sam what he's due and no more. Don't overpay your taxes. Learn how to have the correct strategies to mediate your taxes. We're not talking about doing anything illegal. We're talking about those things within the legal confines that help you as long as you adhere to the rules and you are compliant. And then the last strategy, what are you leaving behind? Most of us aren't building just for ourselves and our own retirement. Generally, we have loved ones or philanthropies or whatever that we'd like to create assets for to leave behind. So you need to think about that. And don't wait until you're at death's door to think about what you leave behind. That goes back to what's in your goals, and then you want to work toward that daily. Shamir, can you put this particular presentation in the chat? Because we're going to have these blank pages. And if you have them, you can print them out or you can put them on a tablet and you can take notes. We're going to talk about insurance, entities, tax remediation, and oops, do we have another entities or did I just go backwards? Insurance, estate planning. Well, anyway, there should be 4. We'll get to it. Like I said before, I don't do everything perfectly. Sometimes I mess up and we just keep it going. Shamir has put the link in the chat. I'm going to take some notes. I was doing it with my iPad and trying to share it, and that just distracted me. So I'll take questions and we'll take notes and we will decide what we need to address later. We will get back to everything eventually. I'm not saying in a hurry, but let's chat. So the first topic we're going to talk about, and because I'm looking at paper, I'm going to need to bring out my handy dandy reading glasses so I can see what's going on. All right, first, insurance. There are so many different kinds of insurance. Would somebody, or would any of you like to take a stab at just putting in the comments what types of insurance you already know about? Because there are many. Take 10 seconds to put that in. Does anyone want to comment? Yep, life insurance. Anything else? Car insurance. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, there's many different kinds. So there's life insurance, there's liability insurance, there's, thank you, I was just getting ready to say that, errors and omissions insurance, workman's comp, disability, both long-term and short-term, supplemental for your insurance when you've got Medicare. People have insurance on their home. They have, what are they called? Riders. So if you've got special items that need particular insurance, so you'll have a basic home policy. And let's say you have, not me, but let's say one has hundreds of thousands of valuable gems in their home. You're going to want to insure those separately. That's on a rider. All insurance is and is supposed to be is risk pooling. You have a risk of something. You combine it with a whole bunch of people, and that should diminish the individual impact of the risk upon you. Here in Texas, we are facing something with property insurance because we've had a lot of casualties. So it's difficult to disperse that risk across a wider path because the casualties are all within this state. We've had a lot. We've had some flooding. We've had some, what was that, Snowmageddon 2-3 years ago? I can't even remember. There have been a lot of claims, and insurance companies are for-profit entities, so they need to make money. They love collecting premiums. Love. Gimme premiums. Just keep them coming. When the claims start going out, they're less happy. So if you've seen a huge jump in your insurance on your home and even on your insurance on your car, part of the reason is because there are all these claims. Are they spurious claims? No, I think most of them are pretty valid claims, but they start increasing your insurance. On one property I just insured, it's about 45% higher than I expected it would be 6 months ago, 8 months ago. So that's a big jump. When you're looking at cash flow and managing your cash flow, Inflation in the insurance realm is a big one. So let's talk. Oh, thank you. Health insurance, malpractice insurance. Yes. So a lot of your cash flow going out the door is going to go toward insurance. It's a legitimate expense since you have to pay it. If you're a business person, you need to be mindful that that is something that can offset revenue, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But what types of life insurance is there? There's term life insurance, which is basically for a fixed term. It's a set amount. It starts, you pay your premiums, it ends in 10, 20, 30 years. When it's over, it's done, you have no more insurance. If you choose to get more insurance after that, the same type of insurance, well, 30 years down the road, you're more of a high risk, your insurance will be higher than it is when you start. There's whole life, and basically the rest of them are going to have a death benefit and a cash value amount. So there's whole life, universal variable life, and you'll have a part, say you get $100,000 whole life insurance policy, you have $100,000 fixed death benefit, and then you may have a cash benefit that grows based on some algorithm. Yes, and there's also index. Thank you. There's also a product called a LIRP, Life Insurance Retirement Plan, and you're using insurance and growing rapidly the cash value that you can then borrow against and live against to pay for things in a tax mediated way. I don't quite understand them. We've been looking into them, or at least my husband has. I think I'd like to. My mother bought a whole life insurance for me when I was 18. I haven't had to pay premiums on that in a while. These are all things to look into. But when I say there's a lot of type of insurance, it gets a little overwhelming. Let's say you run a business and your business has vehicles and you have employees or contractors riding the vehicles. Well, you're going to need auto insurance, you're going to need liability. And depending on what those people are doing in the vehicles or on your behalf, you're going to need errors and omissions insurance. And something I heard about recently, I forgot what it's called, but it's something about protecting cyber insurance or something like that, protecting the integrity of personal information that as a course of your business, you have a hold of. One of the reasons as a landlord, I don't like to take lease papers anymore is because I'm responsible for how I handle that information and how I dispose of it. I'd rather just not have it. Now I have a link. You know, people log into that link, they send their documents there, they get their credit check, their background check, their employment verification. I get to look at something that's pretty much curated to help me make a decision, but I don't feel responsible for all of their personal information. And that is a great, great help. So of the different kinds of insurance, let me look at, I have a term, I have a whole, I don't have universal. I've got liability. I've got E&O covered through most of my realtor work. I don't have workman's comp because I don't have clear employees. I have disability and I'm not old enough to get the Medicare, or is it Medicaid? I never remember, supplemental. But I'll be there soon. By the way, in a couple of weeks, less than a couple of weeks, I will turn 59 years old. So that will be the countdown to 60. I'm going to be partying, but each step towards 60 to me is like, okay, Medicare is coming soon. I'll be able to take retirement distributions. I'm doing all those things that when I was in my 20s, I was like, oh my gosh, this is never going to get here. It's so far away. That time went by in the blink of an eye. So if you're young, in your 20s, in your teens, don't think that stuff is never coming or it's so far away you don't even have to think about it. Because honestly, it just seems like the other day I was 19 without responsibilities, and now it's 40 years past that. I am knocking on 60, and it's like, okay, I need to think about what's next. Not what's next 50 years down the road, but what's next 10 years down the road. What do I want to leave behind? That's on my mind every day. And it's not just money, it's knowledge, it's wisdom. So the important thing about Pitranomics is you want to set up your life goals as early as possible. At one point, I'm going to want to go through a boot camp and have everybody work through their goals so we can really, really dig deep down into what we're doing for ourselves. All right, if you have notes, let's talk about entities. Everybody knows about LLCs, corporations, partnerships, limited liability partnerships, all that stuff. So 2 items I want to mention about that. Everybody's talking about, or most of everybody is talking about the Corporate Transparency Act and what it's about and what it's supposed to do. And I can't speak to the legality. All I know is it seems like a looming thing, and I don't really know what that means. The information you're supposed to provide, I feel like it's already there. So this is going to be another use of it. I've been strongly recommended to read the Corporate Transparency Act. I haven't done it yet. Hold on, let me put a note here. Star, reminder, read the CTA. Even though I'm not an attorney, I'm not going to understand everything about it. At least if I read it, maybe I'll know where to ask some questions. The wonderful person who appeared last week, Cedric Brown, I had a quick Zoom with him today, and he was like, yeah, you need to read it. You may not understand every aspect of it, but it's better to have read it so you can at least start asking some questions than to never have read it and be completely blindsided. When it comes to reading, I'm going to mention something else I do. I read loan documents. Being a landlord, every loan document I sign is different from the previous one, even if it's with the same lender. They're always adding stuff or taking stuff away. And you can negotiate on your loan documents. Because keep in mind, even if you're buying a house and you're getting a qualified mortgage, well, that's a lender, like a broker lender, selling you a product, and they add their own wrapping around it. You might not be able to negotiate on that underlying required qualified mortgage stuff, but you can certainly ask about the things that that particular lender adds on. Read your documents. It's very important if you're in a partnership, if you're in a corporation, if you're in an LLC, and you're encumbering yourself with some kind of documents, you need to understand how your business was set up, your operating agreement, your particular roles. Are you allowed to encumber the property or encumber the assets? Make sure you understand what's going on with your entities. To whom do I suggest you go? Find a really good attorney. So if you're in, say, real estate investing and you need assets to either house, protect, or whatever your assets, speak to someone who specializes in real estate law. If you're interested in finding out about what's the particular tax treatment of those properties, of the revenues, once they're in those entities, you're going to talk to another person with, well, you're going to want a different set of specialties. Maybe the same attorney that helps you set up the entities is able to help you manage and protect and maybe shield from undue taxes. Maybe not. These are questions you need to ask. You can't assume the one attorney you go to can handle all of your needs. They're like doctors. You have family practitioners, you have the ear, nose, and throat guy, you have obstetrics, you have plastics, you have urologists. They don't all practice the same. Yes, they're all doctors. Yes, they have general knowledge. That's all the same. But if you go to a specialist, it's because there's a particular issue in a narrower field that you need help with. So go out and find those specialists. How do you choose the best person to ask, the best attorney? I find it's when you look around and see if there's someone that's doing or talking about the things you're interested in. And don't be afraid to say, hey, can I get a recommendation from you about your XYZ attorney or your thus, and so attorney? That's how a lot of divorce attorneys get their business, by referral. If someone says, yes, he helped me get my divorce the way I wanted to, and you're going through a divorce, you're going to be interested. If you're not planning to go through a divorce, maybe you're not interested. I'm going to tell you something else about attorney assistance, about insurance, about all of these types of protections. If you can imagine the threat, the potential threat, decimating what you've built, look into ways to protect it, look into ways to find the people you need to help you do that. Pretty simple. Most of us have cars, most of us have car insurance, some of us only have liability. If you have a car that's worth $500, why do you need to carry full comprehensive with like a $200 deductible? If it gets wrecked, it gets wrecked. Buy another car. However, what you don't want to get into is not abiding by the rules of the location where you are regarding car insurance. It's your choice whether or not to go beyond the minimum. It's your choice. What is the risk you're willing to take in the event of a foreseeable casualty? Insurance really isn't that good against the unforeseeable. How do you put in place something you can't imagine? But there are many things that you can imagine. When I was at the meeting with Mr. Cedric Brown, and also I think when he was here last week, he talked about got a divorce. I was able to protect the assets in the trust because that wasn't part of community property. I find it very interesting that people will go into marriages and not think about the likelihood of divorce. It's not like you want to get a divorce. I'm not saying that, hey, you do this because the likelihood of divorce is very high and you're going to do it. You do it because statistics show the likelihood is high, and it would be completely irresponsible not to at least consider protecting yourself. That's it from my rant. It's just, if it's foreseeable, if you can imagine it, or if the people who are in your business and good at it can imagine it, take the time to protect yourself from foreseeable threats and casualties. All right, so about CTA, what did I say? Reminder, look into what is involved with the CTA should that affect your business. Apparently that goes into effect on the 1st of January. It is now what, the 7th? Is today the 7th or the 6th? 7th. So 2 weeks, 2 weeks from today, I will be 59. We are counting down my 58. All right, we're going to move into tax. Well, before we move into anything, do we have any questions? I do see one. I did not get the information about Mr. Brown's Monday and Thursday Zooms, which probably wait today. So let me just take a moment, because if I go somewhere, I am going to forget to do it. So we'll do it right now. Sorry to do this on the Zoom. Where may we find information about your Zooms? And I'm sorry I hear the police out there. Hope they're not here for me. I didn't speed anywhere. Okay, so let's talk about tax mediation. Most of us, when we start working, we go get a job. It's a corporate job. It's W-2. We fill out the W-9, how many exemptions, whatever we have. I haven't filled that out in a while as far as for a corporate job. Your job withholds your federal taxes, state if you're in a state tax place, city if you're in a city tax place, Social Security, Medicare, all of these things come out of your salary before you even get a chance to get your check. It's gone. It's like, whew, where'd it go? So you might be able to say, oh, I make $5,000 a month. And you're like, well, why am I only getting $2,800? Because that's your net. All of these other things go out the door. And the number of protections for W-2 income in no way compares to the number of protections, deductions, and whatnot for people who are self-employed. So that is why when people start becoming self-employed or they have a business, they start, instead of they just make their salary, they have revenue against which they offset expenses. And then you have this line. So you sell widgets. You sell 100 widgets, they're $5 each. You have $500. But you can't pay taxes on $500 Because, think about it. You've paid some money to build those widgets. If each widget costs you $2 to build, well, you get to take $2 per widget off. So that's, I've forgotten, yeah, $200 off. So you've only really made $300. But wait, you had to buy a plant in order to make those widgets. You get to depreciate the plant. Let's say each year you depreciate $50 worth. So now instead of having $300 worth of income, you only have $250 worth of income. But wait, this plant that you have bought, that you depreciated, you have a loan on it. So the interest paid on that plant that you've depreciated, mind you, but you're also paying a loan on it. Let's say it's another $50. Well, then you're down to $200 worth of income. But wait, you have insurance, you have personnel, you have whatever. So you put all of those expenses in there. And then let's say at the end of the year, your revenue is $500 for your 100 widgets that cost $5, but your income is maybe $25. I'm using smaller numbers so you can talk about or think about this more easily. I don't want to use hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you go down to the $5, that's your income. But that's what you want to pay the taxes on, not the $500 of revenue, because then you're going to be negative in the hole. You're paying taxes on the $5 worth of net income after after debt service, net income after expenses. All of that now is a much smaller tax requirement. Let's take a look at the person that most people know is playing the tax game pretty well. He writes about it in his books, and that's former President Trump. Maybe soon to be again President Trump. I don't know. I'm not going to really address that as what I hope or what not. But let's talk about the fact that he has filed bankruptcy, not personally, but business bankruptcy. He definitely takes advantage of tax mediation strategies, and he adheres to the old adage, own nothing, control everything. Control a lot, be able to use assets but not own them, and the assets you use, maybe they're contributing to the expenses against your revenue, and that way you're paying less on taxes. As an example, most of us that have W-2 income and we buy this wonderful iPhone, and we're like, oh my gosh, yes, it is $1,000 or however much an iPhone is, but you take your net salary and you go buy your iPhone and there you have it. But the business person, they go buy the iPhone and they have all of their revenue and they expense, because items like that you can fully expense in the current year. As far as I know, don't hold me to any kind of tax information. I always refer to my wonderful CPA. But you get to expense that. So let's say you go back to, let's say you make $10,000 a year, and $1,000 of it is a cell phone. Well, the person on the W-2 side is paying for that cell phone with after-tax dollars. The business person, who can definitely demonstrate that they need that phone and who can't demonstrate that they need that phone for business purposes, is able to pay for it with before-tax dollars, reducing their tax liability. So if you're a high net worth or high earner, you might be paying a difference of 38% on that $1,000 phone, if that makes sense. So tax mediation requires that your business is in the correct entities, set up correctly, and that you comply with all of the hoops you have to jump through. It's like a game in order to remain compliant and to keep your corporate veil intact. One of the reasons I was so excited about what Mr. Cedric Brown said last week is it appears that it would greatly simplify the intentions that I had, both with tax mediation and with asset protection. I will keep you updated as to how I move forward with that. If anybody has any questions later, please feel free to ask along the way, because it's not going to be instantaneous. I'm looking forward to learning a lot. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is estate planning. So keep in mind, all of this is a way to protect what you've built so you can enjoy it in your lifetime. and pass it on to your heirs or whatever you want to leave it to, which brings us to estate planning. And before you go talk to an estate planning professional, an attorney or whoever, a consultant, you have to think about, for whom is this legacy intended? And for what purpose? So, for example, I know people who have children with special needs, and these special needs adults will never be able to take care of themselves completely. They will either need assets that a trustee can manage to take care of them, or they will need assets so they can have another family member take care of them. You're going to want to determine how much. This is where budgeting really comes into place, because what you leave behind, you can't change after you die. So you're looking to plan with as much strategic focus as you can. And when do you want these things conveyed? So the typical parents, they have babies. Let's say they have $1 million to leave their kids. We got to think about it. What if that parent or those parents died when their kids were 2 and 3? You can't have 2 and 3-year-olds have $1 million. So you have to leave it in such a way that people you trust are administering those assets on behalf of your kids, your minor kids. And you want someone to take care of them, not only financially, but to raise them in the way you would like for them to be raised, as best as you can possibly set that up. But let's say you get the kids through college and now they're about to graduate. Well, you might think, okay, they could have $1 million, but they might be a little irresponsible. So I'm going to have that in a trust of people that are going to administer them and provide them benefits according to the guidelines that I have set up. And they can get used to this money in the event I depart this earth while they're, 20, 21 years old, not quite responsible enough to have a large amount of money just set on them, because I know I would have blown it. I think most kids would have blown it. Not every single one, but if you know your children, you can plan accordingly. Or maybe you'd want that to be staggered. They get some of it at 35 and some of it at 45 and some of it at 55. These are things you must decide that you want to do and how you want to do it and for whom you want to do it and for what purpose you want to do it before you put it into place. Death happens to all of us. While you're living, make your wishes known. Express them, communicate them, put the structures into place so as best you can foresee, your wishes are carried out. So those are the 4 topics I kind of wanted to talk about, and I want to take the time to make this a lot more interactive today. So are there any questions? Do people want to raise an issue that we can discuss? Thank you for listening to my rambling.
Hey, can we talk about the gentleman that we met this week and some of what he put in place?
Cedric, do you want to speak about the
entity? No, I was thinking of the other gentleman. I don't want to use his name. Hearts.
Okay. Oh, okay. So yes, I had the opportunity to meet someone earlier this week, and I want to follow up with him because some of the things that he said, I was like, whoa, woo. So I met someone, he's a business person. He is a real estate investor. Now what he says, and this is what I was taught, is that each of his entities is a single use entity. Every property has its own entity. I had to start doubling up or else I would have driven myself crazy. So I started out that way. Maybe he's doing it differently. And keep in mind, if you have, a bunch of single family homes, maybe you want to group them together. But if you have a multifamily, you might want to keep those separate. I don't know exactly what kind of real estate he is in, but he's very knowledgeable. He talks about, one of the things he said that I was just sitting there like, wow, is he is leaving funds in trust for his daughters and nothing for his sons. That his sons, they're men, they can make their own way. Daughters are something different. I have a slightly different viewpoint about that, as does my husband. We're in full agreement that we're trying to best prepare our kids for their kids. So all of our kids are having grandchildren, not just the daughters and not just the sons.
Don't forget about the add-on comment, though. His add-on comment was that his sons were not interested in learning
Oh,
and
yes, I forgot about that.
participating
Yes.
in the business. Because if they were more interested, then he would probably be more open to including them. But because they shunned understanding about what he was building and why he was building it, you may continue.
Exactly. You know, the first time I really thought about this was when my kids, both of them, I think they were in diapers. I think it was that long ago. And I read the will of, is it Henry Fonda, father of Jane Fonda? Yes. And he just decided not to give hardly any money to certain kids. And I was like, that's kind of rude. I would never do that. Well, now that I'm a parent of almost grown kids, it's not that I don't want to be equitable, but equitable isn't necessarily about 50% money. You have to look at other things. Who is interested enough to help keep the business going strong? The person who is taking the active role, I think, is entitled to a little more. That's my belief now. You know, because they're actually doing the work of maintaining the assets for the family. If you decide that there are errors that you don't want to include, setting up the correct entities is a way to do it. Here's another example. This is not what that man said before, but I, as a woman, pretty aware of every child to which I've given birth. But men might not be quite as aware of every child that is their offspring. So when my husband and I wrote our initial will, it was, okay, we named the children that were going to be beneficiaries of that will. And we specifically said that no other children would be involved, because this is what he and I were building together, and it was for our children. Is it right or wrong? I mean, here's where it comes to you're putting your wishes in place. This is the time to think about what it is you want to do and how best to accomplish that. I certainly wouldn't judge anybody, or I would at least try not to, what they decide to do with the assets they've created, except to hopefully place them in the hands of someone who knows how to steward them responsibly. Because we've all heard of trust fund babies that don't spend their money responsibly. And in fact, they're great menaces because they have too much money and no self-control. So thank you, David, for bringing that up. That's a really good point. Your value system is going to come into play here as to how you decide to leave your assets. And one more thing, if you're going to leave significant assets, take the time to prepare the recipients while you're alive. You can't prepare them after death. And not that I think you'll care about earthly assets once you're gone, but if the whole intention is to leave some kind of benefit for future generations, be proactive and think about how that can happen. So thank you, David, for bringing that up. Did we cover all of the corners, nooks, and crannies of that? Okay. Hey, is your thumbs up thing working?
Most of them. We covered most of them. My thumbs
Are there
up
any
is
that we
not,
missed?
Yeah, but they're kind of in depth, so we won't touch those.
No, go ahead and put it in the chat.
Well,
so we can...
well, no, just real quick, okay. One of the things he said was that each entity or each property had its own entity, and all of the entities were owned by the family trust.
Yes.
And understanding that in based on last week's discussion, there's three types of trusts. There's a family trust, a business trust, and a foundation component. And the foundation is strictly for giving away money. And if I misspeak, please correct me. Okay. Just understanding what those are and why they're in place. If we don't know what they are and why they're in place, then we will totally misunderstand what the purpose of them being there or, having them there are.
You're exactly right. So let's visit what David's talking about from a point that I am not in any way an expert and I'm learning. So we talked about the family trust and the particular type of trust that they mentioned. Okay, let's take this down because you can use an acronym. NGICDS. You have a chance, write that down. NGICDS. So these types of family trusts are non-grantor, irrevocable, complex, discretionary, spendthrift trusts. One more time. Non-grantor, irrevocable, complex, discretionary, spendthrift. And you can Google basically that acronym and come up with stuff. But in a nutshell,
one more time. NGCDI? What?
NGICDS.
Okay,
you can have it in any order. The NG is the non-grantor. The I is the irrevocable. The C is the complex. The D is the discretionary. And the S is the spendthrift.
Thank you.
Yep. So non-grantor basically means that I am not setting up the trust and transferring assets. Basically, someone else sets up the trust and then you provide the assets. One of the things I love about attorneys is that they look at legalese and understand what the loopholes and the workarounds are because they comprehend that language. I can understand, I would say I'm about 2.5% fluent in legalese. The rest of it, I'm like, what does this mean? Don't know. That's why you need your interpreter and someone who can help you work around. The irrevocable part means once assets are conveyed to the trust, they can never be sent back to the grantor. And that scares a lot of people. But again, you speak to the correct attorney, there's a workaround. You're controlling, but not owning. The complex is, if I remember correctly, it's not a pass-through entity. It has its own tax returns. It's a completely different and separate entity. I might be wrong. Don't hold me to it. Still learning. The discretionary is that the trustees have unencumbered control by the grantor as to how to administer the trust. So if I, for example, set up a trust and I make, say, Shamir the trustee, if I have control over how she can administer the trust, it is not a discretionary trust. And the last part is spendthrift. There is sort of a staggered or incremental way that the assets go to the beneficiary. And the reason why you want to do that is you want to keep the assets in the trust. So let's say you have a spendthrift trust for your son. You love your son, but he don't know how to pick a good woman. And I'm just using my son as an example. I'm not saying my son doesn't know how to pick a good woman. But let's say my son doesn't pick a good woman and she's like, ooh, he looks like he has money. I'm going to marry him and I'm going to get all his money. But she marries him and she tries to divorce him and she realizes he owns nothing. Like she's thinking he didn't sign a prenup because he didn't need to. He didn't own anything. So there's nothing for you to take. You guys, what's the name of that soccer player, football player, somebody whose wife tried to take his assets and he signed everything over to his mother? Well, in this case, everything is owned by the trust. The trustees dispense or not dispense benefits to the beneficiaries. So let's say I'm the trustee and my son is a beneficiary and he marries undesirable woman over here. And I'm like, I'm going to give them enough money to rent a house, not own a house, rent a house. Right? And if she tries to take the house, well, it's a rental. If she tries to attach his income or disbursements from the trust, I can just stop him. He won't get nothing. So she won't get nothing. That's a simplistic way of looking at it. And please know that I'm not an attorney. I'm not a CPA. I'm not an estate planning professional. This is just my interpretation of the vast amount of information I've heard in the past week that I'm curious about. So if that's one of the things you're looking for, and for example, I have friends that have special needs children, right? They can't give the adult child control over the assets. They have to put it in the hands of a trustee that they trust, gotta trust the trustee to administer and provide for their children according to their wishes or according to their guidelines. And this is why you have to learn to be specific, because you have to write stuff that's going to be in place after you can no longer correct it. So really, 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 really think about it. Get to know who is going to be the recipient of the trust's assets, so you can better figure out what it is they need to be prepared for and how that thing needs to be administered on their behalf. I have 2 children. I love my children. They are 2 very different people with 2 different I guess financial expenditures. One spends a whole lot more than the other. You know, one seems to care a whole lot more about money and stuff than the other. Neither is wrong, but you want to take that into account when it comes time to set up these entities. So I don't think I'm going to divide it based on gender. My husband and I really don't agree with that, but we certainly want to consider the specifics of each child and work accordingly. And each of you who have more than 1 children know that each child handles things differently. And so just be mindful. And if you ever want to have a good read, either read Henry Fonda's will. There are some other people that have wills like that, but that was the first one that I was like, that man's gone. He is beyond the anger of his kids or even the happiness of his kids. His wishes were carried out. I wonder how that's going. So also, if you want to do some good reading, read some major foundations financial reports. If you have a spare hour or 2 and some caffeine, or you're just really interested, follow the trail of the money, which brings me to following the trail of the money. When I talk about tax mediation, let me go back to that. Learn how to read financial statements. Spend some time understanding the language of balance sheets, cash flow statements, and income statements. They aren't the same. So if you're looking at a balance sheet, you have the value of assets. So cash, of course, is worth the cash, right? But if you have jewelry or paintings or property, those have to be independently valued, because guess what? Insurance fraud is overvaluing an asset. So you want to get them valued pretty responsibly. So you have at the top level all the value of what you have. So you have a house that's worth $200,000, but if you owe $198,000, then you have a net of $2,000 of value in that house. On the other hand, if it's worth $200,000 and you only owe $2,000, you have a net value of $198,000. The balance sheet is a way of knowing the value of all your assets, less the liabilities, the liens, the encumbrances against those assets, to come up with net worth. Net worth is shown on the balance sheet, and it's sort of a really close approximation of how much cash you would have in your pocket or bank if you sold everything and satisfied all the liabilities. Okay. Income statements. Income statements are very useful in your tax mediation strategy, as is the balance sheet. But income statement is, how much are you paying taxes on? What is your total revenue? All of the money that comes into your business trickles through all of these assets and gets knocked down and diminished to have a net income that you pay taxes on. Then you have a net income after taxes. Now, income is not the same as cash flow, which is why you want to have the cash flow statement. And when you're doing commercial lending, they want to look at your cash flow statement too, a lot of times, depending on what type of business you're in, because they know that businessmen and investors and all that are doing their best to minimize income legally, but they have lots of cash to put to work projects. So the cash flow is going to be money comes in for a sale of a product, money goes out for the expense of the product, money comes in or value is there based on the asset of a project. You've had to spend money to improve a project. By the way, if you have a property such as a house and you need to make a capital expenditure, say you're going to update the floors and the paint or whatever, that does not go on the income statement. That hops all the way over to the balance sheet because that improves the value of the property and increases liability or decreases cash or whatever. One day we'll have some fun with financial statements, but capital expenditures don't help you mediate taxes. But, well, not directly. What they do, and keep in mind, I'm not a CPA, I'm not an expert, this is just the Juli version. What they do is they increase the cost basis of your asset and you depreciate your asset based on the cost basis of the asset. And I hope that doesn't get too confusing. But anyway, cash flow, financial statements. We need to really cover those. Balance sheet, income statement, cash flow statement, because you can have a business that's exceedingly profitable on the income statement and fails because it has a dearth of cash, which is evidenced by the cash flow statement. All right, I can't see what that is. Let me see what it says. See how many people would like to cover that again. I don't know what that cover or what. And what's Hakimi? Hakimi? Or Hakimi. I don't know how to say that. Anyway.
That's Jacob. You need to ask Jacob what that is. But mine
Jacob, what's Hakimi?
You asked about that football player that put all his assets into his under his mom.
Did I say that right? Hakimi or Hakimi? Whatever.
Something like that.
That's who did it. Okay. And David, what are you talking about? How many people want to cover that? Which is that? Have we covered
the financial statements?
The financial statements. So who here feels they have a pretty good grasp of how to understand financial statements? Anybody raise their hand? I can't see.
Me.
Raise your hands. Okay, I don't consider myself an expert, but I think I'm pretty good. My husband is really good. That's his training, and that's where he's used to dealing on a corporate level. How do you find out how to read financial statements? You read
by reading many of them. The more you read,
there is no other way. Read financial statements. I had a good time. The first time I heard about this strategy of using trusts and foundations and whatnot, like we've heard about, I read the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation financial statements. Very, very interesting reading. If you can, what I'd love to have is like 3 different huge screens so I could watch the money from Microsoft to the foundation to one day I will be able to do that with like many different TVs, but that's not today. Or maybe y'all want to do that with me because I think that would be fun. The other thing to think about that Mr. Brown talked about is pay attention to what the really wealthy people are doing. He pointed out that Warren Buffett has sold his banks. What he means, I guess, is sold his interests or shares of those banks. That's what I'm taking that to be.
Yes, he sold everything but Wells Fargo or B of A.
B of A. So yes. Why is that? Let's talk about how you hold your money and the FDIC, the Federal Deposit or Depository Insurance, right? Not everybody understands what that means or how much it covers or what kind of accounts it covers. You know what it doesn't cover? Brokerage accounts. So if you have $1 million at your bank of shares and stocks and all that, FDIC isn't covering that. They cover deposits, money that you deposited into a bank, not money that is working, being brokered by something else. So when it goes back to the insurance, let me just make a note there. Let's talk about the FDIC, because too many people.
Hold on real quick. Why is that important, and who knows why that's important? Because sometimes we make an assumption that everybody understands what does the FDIC do for you and what are the limits. Okay, I'm trying not to make the assumption that everybody knows or everybody doesn't know. Okay.
Okay.
You know, if anybody doesn't know, please say I don't know. Because if you don't know and it's not explained, then you still don't know after we get off the call, or
Okay.
or after we have the conversation, right?
Okay. Does anybody not understand? And you can message privately what FDIC means, and I believe it's Federal Depository Insurance Corporation or something like that.
Yes.
Not.
Yes, it is. Okay.
So here's the other thing.
Just explain what it is, Julie, maybe, and then we can move forward.
I'll explain it to the best of my ability. Keep in mind, I'm going to keep saying this. These are my disclaimers. I'm not perfect. So it covers up to $250,000 of deposits, savings accounts, checking accounts. And they're not every single kind of savings and checking account. So you have to make sure you ask. And if I'm not mistaken, years ago, like 15 years ago, what we were told is I could have a $250,000 account. My husband could have a $250,000 account, and we could have a $250,000 account. Laws change. I don't know what's going on with that. But it's important to realize if the bank fails and you have a $250,000 depository account or less, and somehow the money goes bye-bye, the federal government or an insurance arm of the federal government will guarantee up to $250,000. And you'll get that back. Speaking of insurance, back when my mother was alive, my mother was an amazing woman, did all kinds of things that actually you just can't do now. She would have these huge savings accounts. She would take a loan out on the savings account, and then she would insure the loan. Yeah, you can't really do that as well anymore. They've changed that, but that was pretty crazy. And so, well, I won't go too much more into that on a recorded Zoom, but I thought that was a pretty nifty little strategy she came up with. My mother was also a gambler. She liked to bet on greyhound dogs, but she didn't just want to go to the, track and put her money down on dogs. No, keep in mind, my mother was a programmer at NORAD, and she created the programs that guided missiles and satellites. So she had no problem creating these programs to develop the probability, lots and lots of data. I had to input lots of data on not these modern computers, those old janky DOS computers from back in the 80s. So she could write these programs that would determine the probability of which dog will win, coming in first, second, and third. And she would make these very complicated bets, which are probably a lot like stock, short, puts, options, and all that. And she would, and I was her runner. So I'd get this list of types of bets to make, and I'm going over there and I said, in race 1 it's going to be such and such the win, and then such and such, and trifecta, and all these words that I don't remember anymore. Yes, I was a runner. I had to earn my keep to drive the car that I drove, because I had to run her errands. And after a hard day's work, she was playing on her on her programs to predict what dogs would win. So anyway, brilliant lady. Her mind definitely was on another level. I hope I aspire to be like her. I'm not there, but I do my best. Anyway, I think why did I go there? Why did I talk about that? Oh, so when it came to creativity in financial matters, she was an awesome woman. And a person who has met her, David knew me back when my mom was alive, and just unbelievably brilliant woman. Unbelievably brilliant woman. So anything else that we want to wrap up with? Because I think anything that we haven't covered that you'd want to cover, anything that we've covered that you want me to do a little more research to and or about and bring it back. Any questions? Let's have them.
I think one of the most important things for everybody to understand is this, because I even asked this question to a couple different people, and that is that most of this information may or may not apply to us individually, but it is important that we know that there's information out there that does apply to those that need this type of information, you know. So I guess what I'm really saying is this: I don't have enough assets for this to affect me personally. Okay. But I know people who do have enough assets that need this information. And therefore, it's been given to me to make sure that I pass it on and say, here's another option for you because you do have these kind of assets, right? Not just holding it inside me and letting it die there because it doesn't apply to me right now. It will apply to me. The question is how soon and when. And when it does, you better believe I'm gonna go hire a trust attorney and CPA and all those people to do this kind of work.
Okay. No, I agree. And keep in mind, knowing about stuff gives you the opportunity to be creative about how it's used. But you aren't going to be able to be creative about how it's used until you embrace that inner curiosity about all of these different things. So learn to be curious about things that maybe you can't determine affect you yet, because they may affect you later, or maybe somebody else gives you another piece of information and you're like, sorry, fly. And you might say, oh, I can use that now. David, how many times are we, if you guys know me, if you've hung around me, I've got whiteboards almost everywhere I go. So I can figure stuff out. And there's nothing greater than to be at my whiteboard with somebody that's helping me figure stuff out.
That's what we do.
That's what we do.
All the time.
Pitranomics community is all about masterminding, and we all come together with information and we can all bring it to use it in a different way or a new way or an undiscovered way. So I got it. Okay. Anything else? That, by the way, this is fun. I love interaction. Anything else that anybody would like to ask before we hop off? But with that said, thank you for joining me. And hopefully you guys took some notes. Feel free to reach out and send some questions because I'll constantly be looking into other ways to find out more information. I've enjoyed sharing this. So for the rest of this month, there'll be 2 weeks later in the month that we won't have Pitranomics. It'll be around Christmas and around New Year. I think we have, 1 or 2 more sessions this month, and then we'll pick back up after the first of the year where we start with the first strategy. Who am I?
So that would be next week we will, and then the 21st and the 28th we will not. Is that what you're saying?
I believe so.
Okay.
By the way, what was I gonna say? So 2 weeks from today, please keep in mind I'm turning 59. Starting with the day I'm 59 up until the day I turn 60, God willing, I last that entire year, I will be celebrating the coming of 69. And that will manifest itself in a couple of ways. I am going to be enjoying myself. 1, I'm going to be wanting to learn and get to the top of my game as quickly as I can. I'm going to be tapping into your resources. I hope you can tap into mine. My curiosity will be at an all-time high. And 3, I am hoping to do the best I can, whatever's in my mind, whatever I've learned over the years of my life, to document and share with others. I hope you guys do the same with me. Because what lifts our community up is being able to codify our knowledge, our wisdom for those that come after, so they don't have to keep reinventing the wheel.
Love it.
So anyway, thank y'all for coming, for participating. I love it. Mwah. Have a good night.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.